Hello and welcome to another edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina, and my cat has decided he's out. So I have been doing a whole series on the Rose City Rollers. It is a free pattern on Ravelry. You should really get the pattern. This is not intended to replace the pattern to make your first pair of socks, but to assist you as you do it. A lot of things about the Rose City Rollers you will find overlap with a lot of basic sock patterns, so it can be a good reference guide for all of that. We are at the part to do the toe. I did a whole series about the heel. I broke it down into 3 different parts. And we're gonna get to the toe part today. So the first sock that I made, I did a square toe where you really have a balance between decreases and knit rows. And today I'm going to try with how far I've gotten to the point where I want to do the toe. I'm going to try a rounded toe. And the difference really comes down to how many times you decrease versus how many times you knit, just knit around and set it in place. This one is nice and balanced. You do a decrease row and then you do a set, what I call a set row. This one is going to change the ratio. I'm not going to spell it out in this video because you should really get the pattern yourself. Download it from Ravelry, from another source if she's got it listed other places, to give her the credit for the download and for all the work she's put in onto this pattern. And that is Mara Catherine Briner, who wrote the pattern. Not trying to replace the pattern here, but just trying to give you a heads up for what things mean when you see them in the pattern. What a basic decreased toe row, which you'll find on all kinds of different patterns, what it can look like and what it is meant to do. This video will also cover the end of a classic toe is often the Kitchener stitch. Kitchener stitch. I always get a mouthful over that. I have videos on these decreases and on the Kitchener by itself if you would rather watch those. I will put the link in the description, but this should stick it all in one. Let's get to it. All right, so here is the toe that I've already done. If I open it up, you can see that there's a line where my decreases have come in on either side. We're going to follow the instructions for 1/2 and another half. And if you remember with the Rose City Rollers, it's on double points. These are my really cool caps from Trinkles. We sell these in the shop. So if I take this elastic guy off, I have my one extra. And then we've got it broken onto 4 needles. Needle 1 right here, if we look, if we unwind the yarn, 1 and 2, if we follow it back and look, here's needle 1. 1 and 2 are going to be the top half of my sock. Got this guy flipped upside down. And 3 and 4 are going to be the bottom half to line up. You do want to make sure before you start, if you've been just knitting in a circle on, say, 9-inch circulars, I really hope you marked the beginning of your round, because if you're following her instructions for the beginning of the round, it will come where it needs to. If you start in a different spot, your toe will not be lined up perpendicular to your heel. So if you don't have this on 4 double points, if you've got it on 1/2 and 1/2, we want to decrease at the corners, here and here on this half, and here on the other half. When we're knitting on 4 circulars, we're going to decrease at the beginning of needle 1, at the end of needle 2, at the beginning of needle 3, and at the end of needle 4. If you have this on 2 needles or on magic loop for one side, you decrease at the beginning and the end, and you decrease at the beginning and the end of the other half of each half. That's how it's going to go. So since we're doing this according to her instructions, if you want it to look nice and balanced, here, before we even start this, let's take a look at this guy that's done. If you want it to look balanced, like the stitches angle in on either side, like they're angling in this way, and the same thing on the bottom. Look, they look like they're angling in. You need to do a decrease that leans to the left over here and a decrease that leans to the right over here to make it look like you did it on purpose. So the way that is going to happen, get my stitch markers all lined up. These decreases happen one stitch inside. It gives you some room to play around with. So I'm going to knit one, but it also lets me move my stitch marker if I have one. And slip, slip, knitwise, slip, knitwise. Get my left needle back in the front there and knit them together. That puts my right stitch of those two stitches in front so it leans to the left. And when we're on 4 equally distributed double points, that just means knitting to the end of the double point. Now, needle 2, remember beginning of needle 1, end of needle 2. So needle 2, I'm going to knit until I'm 3 stitches from the end. 2 of those stitches will be my decrease, and then I'll have the one buffer, the one extra one at the end. So I'm going to knit across here. Until I'm 3 stitches from the end. And this time I want it to slant to the right, and a knit 2 together will do that. It will put the stitch on the left of that decrease on top. Knit 1. I'm not done with my row. I need to do that one more time to decrease on both sides of the toe. So if you have different toes of different lengths, sometimes, so again, knit 1, slip knitwise, slip knitwise, knit them together, knit to the end of the needle. If you have toes that one toe sticks out or you want it to slant at a different angle, you can play around with how you do these decreases. But the most commonly done style decreases evenly on the corners. All right, needle 3 we decrease at the start, needle 4 we decrease at the end. So this needle 4, I am going to knit across until I am 3 stitches from the end. All of these require 3 stitches in, 1 buffer stitch at the edge, and 2 stitches for your decrease. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 1 more, and I'm going to knit 2 together by putting my right needle in the front of both of those stitches and knitting them together and knit 1. So I've done my first decrease. I went from my size, I went from 16 on each needle. Now I'm down to 15 on each needle. Now the difference between a square toe and a rounded toe is how many rounds of just knitting you do here. For a square toe, which is the easiest way to go, we're going to decrease, do a decrease round and then a set round and a decrease round and a set round until you're down to the number of stitches she says to do. So I'm doing a rounded toe, which is going to have, it's going to have more rows right up front here of just plain knitting. So I'm going to turn the camera off and knit those rows and pick back up again. Once I've done that, again, get the pattern. But if you want to see how Mara did it, get the pattern to see her suggestions for this. And you can always play around with it too. If you have longer toes that need more room between decreases to not have bunched fabric near your toes, sometimes you have to do a pair according to the instructions to figure out how you want to alter it. It may not come out right the first time. It is all a learning process. So I'm going to keep knitting around without any decreases for the number of rows she's recommended for the rounded toe. But I will meet you back here to review these decreases one more time, at least, before we fast forward to how to do a Kitchener at the end. Okay, so I have done, if we see here, right above my finger is where there's a decrease. And then you can count how many rows above that by how many V's between that decrease row and what's up on my needles for how many rows I did. Now a rounded toe starts with more rows of knitting in between decrease rows. And we're about to start one of those right now. And then towards the end, you may have a fair number of decrease rows in a row. The square toe, everything's balanced. So again, just a refresher. We're gonna decrease, always knit one, there's one buffer stitch. We're gonna decrease at the beginning of needle one, slip, slip, slip them knitwise, and knit them together. Finish knitting across needle one. This will get faster as you go because there will be fewer stitches as you go. Right now I've got about 15 per needle. Needle 2, we're going to decrease at the end because it's the beginning and the end of each half. So I'm going to knit across this one till I get to 3 stitches from the end. There we go, 3 stitches from the end. I'm going to knit 2 together, and I'm going to knit the last one. That's half of my stitches. I've done 1/2, the top half of my foot. So now I'm going to repeat it before I'm done with this row. I'm going to knit 1, slip 1 knitwise, slip a second one knitwise. My left needle's back in front so I can knit them together. Knit across the rest of this needle. And then needle 4, I'm going to knit until I'm 3 stitches from the end. I'm going to knit these 2 together. And I'm going to knit my last stitch. Now I'm down to 14 on each one. I'm going to keep following the directions for how many set rows of just knitting around and how many decreases until I get down to however many stitches she said should be on each needle. And I'll meet you back here then. All right, I am down to my last row of decreases. If you can tell, there's a lot fewer stitches on here. One more round will take me down to the right number of stitches per needle as directed by the pattern. So again, I'm going to knit 1. I'm going to slip, slip, slipping them both knitwise and knit them together. Finish needle 1. Already done with it. Move on to needle 2. This one I'm going to knit until I'm 3 stitches from the end. That won't take me very long. In fact, I'm already there. See, the knit 2 togethers will stack, so will the slip slip knits. They will create a diagonal line. Get my last stitch. Repeat that, so needle 3, my odd needles are knit 1, slip, knitwise, slip, knitwise, left needle back in the front so I can knit them together and finish the needle. Just knit it on out. Needle 4, the even needles, start knitting until you are 3 stitches from the end. Knit 2 together. Try to ignore all the other ones in your face and knit the last stitch. All right, now what I need to do, here's my yarn over here on needle 4. I need to divide the stitches evenly over 2 needles. Now I could just slip the stitches on needle 2 onto needle 1. I'm going to slip them all onto what's on needle 1 and 2 onto my empty needle. And part of the reason I'm going to do that, I always like to see if I can get what I'm working with up on top. Part of why I'm going to do that onto the empty needles, and then this time I'm going to slip them purlwise. I don't want to twist them, so I'm going to stick my needle in like I'm going to purl, is I'm going to take my stitch marker off. I don't want the stitch markers to get involved in the Kitchener stitch because they could get stuck. So I'm going to slip all of these stitches. Whoop, and I almost lost one. Let's see, I lost the stitch behind it. Making sure. Oh, yep. Slipped all of them on there. Now I'm going to slip the second needle. I'm taking off my stitch marker that marked the second needle so that all of the stitches on needle 1 and needle 2 are now on one needle. I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to take one of my empty needles because now I have 2. And I'm going to get all the stitches on needle 3, slip one, take off the stitch marker, slip the rest of them over. Remember, slipping purlwise so you don't twist them. And then I'm going to get the stitches from needle 4. Slip first one, get that stitch marker off, and slip the rest. I slip them one at a time, just so I make sure I don't lose any. All right, so now we have the top, and see, we've got our square one over here and our more rounded one over here. We've got half the stitches, top and bottom, on 2 different needles. I'm going to cut this with a decently long tail so I can start my Kitchener. And Kitchener is a sewn bind off. There are all kinds of other techniques. I still really like this one, so I'm going to thread my tapestry needle, big-eyed, fairly blunt tip needle. And here is Kitchener has, I like to do 4 steps at a time before I pull, like 2 steps and then 2 steps, get my whole front needle done and then my whole back needle. There's a setup I like to do that helps from getting those little bunny ears on the end. So the first thing we're going to do, that this isn't part of the whole repetition, we're just doing it once on the end here, is we're going to stick our needle into the first stitch purlwise and just pull it through. And we're going to stick our needle into, I like to sometimes put a finger here so I can keep them apart and do what I need to. I'm going to stick it into the back needle knitwise. I'm going under these needles. I'm not going over. I'm keeping my sewing needle under at all times to keep things from getting all twisted around the needles. But I'm sticking into that first stitch knitwise, and I'm pulling it through. I'm pulling it snug, not tight. We don't want it too tight. We want to match the tension of our stitches. Now is where we start the repetition. There's 4 steps. Steps 1 and 2 use the first needle. Steps 3 and 4 use the back. So I'm going to put my needle, my sewing needle, through the front loop, the first front loop, like I'm gonna knit, and I'm gonna take it off the needle, but I'm not pulling through yet because then I'm gonna take my sewing needle and put it purlwise through the second stitch, and then I'm gonna pull through both of them. Pull it snug. Now the back needle, I'm gonna go through the first stitch purlwise and take off the knitting needle and go through the second stitch knitwise and pull through. Many different ways to remember this. It's when we come to the front, it's knit, take off, purl, pull through, and keep the yarn and everything underneath. Back needle, we're going to start with a purl, take off, and a knit and pull through. You only take them off the knitting needles when instructed to do so. And there's really one thing per stitch. So on the front needle, again, it is knit, make sure I get it in there, knit, take off, purl, pull through. Back needle is purl, take off, knit, pull through. There's different things like you start the back one with the last thing you did to the front one. There's many different ways to remember, but at the very basic minimum, front starts with knit, knit, take off, purl, pull through. Only do one thing for each stitch. Back needle is purl, take off, knit, pull through. And when I say purl and knit, it's how I am sticking my needle through that loop, my sewing needle. And if we take a look at what's happening in there, it will look like the stitches just keep going. So again, I'll do it a couple more times, but then I'm just going to finish up. There's knit, off, purl, pull. Back needle, purl, off, knit, pull. This can cut down how many times you have to pull the thread through the fabric, the yarn through the fabric. Front one, knit, off, purl, pull. Keep your yarn under those needles. Back needle, purl, off. Try to get up there and not catch anything underneath. Knit, pull. Knit, off, purl, pull. Purl, off, knit, pull. Use your fingers from your left hand to control what's happening with your loops if you need to. Knit, off, purl, pull. Purl, off, knit, pull. Again, if you take a look at what's happening, it just looks like the stitches continue when it's done properly. If you lose track, if you finished I really recommend not stopping until you're done with all four, or at least 1, 2, and then 3, 4. Because if the yarn's back here, you just finished your back needle, and you come to the front and you go knit, off, purl, pull. And if your yarn's in front, you know it's time to go purl, off, knit, pull. You're going to do that till you get down to 1 stitch left on each needle. So knit, off, purl, pull, purl, off, knit, pull. almost done. If I do one more, knit, off, purl, pull. Now on the back one, I'm going to purl, get it in there, take off, knit, pull through. Now there's only one left, so we can only do one thing. So I'm going to go through this one knitwise, the front knitwise, and pull through because there's nothing else to do, and the back one purlwise. Whoop, he came off my needle, but he's done. Now, some of what can happen, you saw that last stitch I purled through was really big and loose. We can even that out by pulling on other stitches that it was connected to back here. But more often than not, that's part of the dog ears. People talk about this having, the bunny ears, what have you. So I might come over, if it's under, come over and inside and see if I can just tack it down as best I can. Pulling the yarn to the inside. There is my Kitchener. There might be something over here. I don't think it's too bad. And I'll weave my ends in later, but then if you want to see how the curved toe compared to the square toe, there you go. This one has a more curved edge to it. This one is a little more boxy. I bet they both fit on my feet just fine. So thanks again for joining us for the toe on our Rose City rollers here, which is very much like the toe on many cuff down basic socks. So it can be really helpful for a lot of patterns. I just did the rounded toe instructions, and my first sock had the square toe instructions. I think they're both going to fit fine on my feet, but if I have a chance, I'll report back and see how they did. So I'm ready to go. I personally don't block my socks. I do the block with wear thing. That is a personal preference thing. Sometimes when there's patterns on it, there's lace work on a sock and you want it to really shine, you may want to block it. Just be careful of what size you pick of blockers. There are sock blockers that outline and you stick your socks damp on them and it's beautiful, and just don't want to stretch them out too much. So try them on your feet and see how they fit and feel. And you can't always do what I do, which is block with wear. Full disclaimer, I think I've said it somewhere else in this series, I am not an expert on socks. I am just, this is our knit along for the shop, so I'm doing it and I'm passing along what I'm picking up as I do it for many things. I have finished, this is my second pair of socks that I've ever finished for a whole pair in terms of for myself. I've knit quite a few for friends and family, and most of those were thicker, so I'm still picking up stuff as I go. I'm not an expert, but I'm happy to share what I've experienced. So I hope you've enjoyed this series. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can ring that little bell, click a bell for updates so you know when we post new things. Sometimes they are in a series like this one, and sometimes I am just doing general skills and fun things like that. So it's both knit and crochet. At the very least, if you can give it a thumbs up if you like the video, or comment or question underneath, that all helps the algorithms. We also have memberships here if you want to join and get your name in the end credits for a monthly donation. And we also have patreon.com. You get to do a monthly donation, name in the credits, and swag over on patreon.com/sundragon. I hope whatever you are choosing to craft, that your crafting is filled with joy and confidence. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Who's my kitty, huh? Are you going to be good while I'm filming? Gonna be a good boy? Maybe? That's your I haven't decided yet face.